I'd like to thank the grace of heaven, the virtues of the masters, and the compassion and mercy of the grand predecessors, senior transmitters, lectures, temple masters, everyone giving me this opportunity today to talk about Tao Te Ching, chapter 57. All right, okay, so chapter 57, its title is Rule the Kingdom, okay, or Governing the Kingdom, ruling the kingdom. This is the first explicit chapter on governing, even though, which I will tell you, there's a previous chapter that goes way back, indirectly talks about that's related to this. But anyway, just to give an overview, chapter 57, 58 are connected. So next time, chapter 58 will pick up on what we talk about in chapter 57 in from a different perspective, but it's also talking about ruling a kingdom. And chapter 60 a little bit, but that's a future. Okay, so chapter 57 is divided into 3 sections. Okay, so the first section, first three phrases, and then the analysis. It's in phrases 4 through, I think it's 13, yeah. Okay, and then the conclusion, okay? And section 2 and 3, these 2, 3 are kind of complements. They complement each other, okay? Think of it like yin and yang, okay? So section 2 is like the, I would say it's like the one side, I want to say it's the yin component. Yeah, it's like that. It's talking about the negative, what would happen if, certain conditions are like that. I mean, if you do certain things, what are the negative cause effects? And then section 3 is if you do certain things, what are the positive? Okay, so that's chapter 57, and just bear in mind, this chapter, the next chapter, chapter 58, is also related. Okay, so let's go to the outline. Okay, so first section, first 3 phrases: govern a country with upright integrity, excuse me. Deploy the military or employ the military with surprise tactics and take the world with non-interference. Okay, so it's it's very basic, but it's touched on 3 areas. Okay, or as 3 parts. Okay, so the first the first phrase of governing a country. Okay, now Tao Te Ching, not just this chapter, but other chapters as well, or just about every chapter. There are different levels, different layers of meaning, okay? So in this particular chapter, it's 2, you can say it's maybe 3, but at least 2 layers of meaning, which is at the superficial level, it's called basic level. It's I don't want to say it's external in this case. It could be internal too, but it just deals with the country level. You can say country/social level, and then there's an individual or personal level, meaning the higher level. Okay, all right. So just let you know, that's how this chapter is. Okay, in terms of meaning. So at the kingdom level, basic level, a king should rule with integrity. That is, they use proper ethical means to govern a country. Okay, that's very basic. Okay, that's the basic level. But then I'll get to at personal level. That this word means country. kingdom, country, nation, state. So that's the basic meaning, but it also means you, the individual. There's an individual. It means you are your own kingdom, your own country. Okay, so that's the next level. Okay, but at the basic level, the king, the ruler of the kingdom, state, country, okay, should use, should rule properly. Use proper ethical means. And another way of saying is that the rulers should be open and transparent with the people. They don't practice deception, no deceit, no hiding the truth, being honest to people. And the ruler should apply the laws of the kingdom evenly, fairly, justly, all that. Okay, so very Confucian-like. Okay, all right. Now, then there's at the personal level, your own kingdom. Okay, so you should rule your life with integrity, where the people of the kingdom represents your physical self and personal kingdom, your life and destiny. Okay, so that's the other level. Okay, you could say individual versus kingdom or state. Okay, but the understanding is then you should manage your life with upright integrity, being honest and true to yourself and others, while self-deception, self-delusion is the fastest way to dismantle one's cultivation. So, all right, so that's what the first phrase is. Applies to the kingdom, yes, to a ruler, and also to yourself, because you're the ruler of your own kingdom. Okay, yeah, the word son, okay, so we've talked about this term. We also, it's been, we've already encountered it, okay, previously in chapter 10 and chapter 22. So, all right, so literally it just means to stop, but it means proper or, upright, etc. Okay, but at the highest level, it represents our Buddha nature essence, or being at one, or be at rest, or be at rest with our highest excellence. Okay, so that's another, right? Okay, so additional meaning is, when we say to be the ruler should govern a country with upright integrity, just be credible, and trustworthy with others. Tell it as it is. Be honest. Okay. Now, there's another way to interpret or, view this first term. Okay. Let's go to the link here. Okay. All right. So it's okay. Appendix A, governance. Okay. There are 3 levels, right, in governance. Oops. Yeah, 3 levels. Okay, 3 levels. There's the general. That's the govern. That's the more specific. I mean, more narrow. You can say narrow or individual. Okay. Okay. So the first one is to govern or discipline yourself. Okay, oneself. Then the second level is after you've governed yourself properly, or discipline yourself pretty well. Okay. Then the next level is to expand outward, right? We've dealt with that in chapter 52, I believe. 50, sorry, not 52, 54, well-established practice and to hold on to the teachings of Tao, chapter 54, right? That expanding circles. The next one is to regulate one's family or govern one's family, okay? And then beyond that, then they're intermediate. Then there will be you can't govern this. Well, yeah, you can say indirectly after your family, beyond your family, it would be more like neighbors, society, stuff like that. All right, but then ultimately the whole country. Okay, so that's the 3 levels. Okay, all right, so that's what the first phrase is when you say, govern govern the country. Okay, or govern the kingdom. These are the 3. Okay, now there are counterparts. The counterpart, let's use it 3 poisons. Okay, which from a Buddhist perspective. At each of these three levels, the oneself, the country, the family and the country. This is very confusion, okay? Okay, confusion. Now I'm gonna point out using, but the other one is the right column, three poisons. It's more Buddhist, okay? All right. Now Buddha didn't specifically address about governing a country. I mean, he was talking about individual journey of enlightenment. Okay, more on the event. But there are three components in Buddha's teachings, the three poisons that does impact, the way we govern ourselves or the way we discipline ourselves, and family and society or country/country. So the first one is greed. Okay, so that's obviously greed can be at the individual level, yeah, okay, and also it can lead to the family level and the country level. All right, so especially if you are the head of a family or the ruler, right? So your own greed will have an impact on the way you govern yourself or discipline yourself, the way you regulate your family, and the way you govern the country. All right. So that's okay. So I think in previous chapters, did we talk about chapter 55, 56? All right. Greed is a bad thing, right? I mean, it's I think 50, oh, gee, 50. 50 previous chapters, okay? Not so much 56, but at least 54, I want to say 53, right? The Great Tao, talking about how the courts are corrupt, right? That's because the officials are corrupt. I mean, in that case, okay, we talk about greed, how greed will impact the country, okay, as well. All right. Then the second component in the three poisons is rage or anger. Okay. So, when we get angry or when we fly into a rage, that means you lost self-control. So you couldn't govern yourself properly. All right. Then also rage can influence the way the harmony of the family or the family interaction. So there's loss of harmony in the family. And if you're a ruler of a country and you have anger and rage, that could lead to, you say, ill-advised, unwise decisions, that could plunge the country into war, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and then war would be extreme in, but a lot of other things. Okay, misguided policies, et cetera, et cetera. So that could impact. All right. So that's what rage does so you have to be careful, right? So, and then lastly, ignorance, right? Ignorance means confusion, delusion, or misconception, both at the personal level, right? So if you are confused or deluded or don't understand the principles, that could affect how you govern yourself or discipline. Similarly, at the family level, right? Okay, if you don't, example, let's say if you're ignorant or confused on, filial piety, right? Then, there could be problems, right? With your relationship with your children, et cetera, right? Or the children and you, or husband and wife, et cetera. And then lastly, at the country level, obviously, if you have, if you're confused and then, you couldn't govern the country properly, right? Okay. So when we talk about the three poisons, we generally talk more about at the personal level, right? That these components, greed, rage, and ignorance, at the personal level, right? But actually, it has an impact on the family and the country level as well. Okay, so this is just another perspective. Okay, so, all right, so, okay, let's go back. Sheesh, where's my mouse? Where's my mouse? No, it stinks. Okay, hold on. There it is. No, is that it? Okay, yeah. All right, okay, let's go back. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's go to the second phrase. Okay, now it says when utilizing or employing or deploying the military, you want to be creative and innovative, okay, by using unexpected strategies and tactics. That's what this the second phrase is, okay? Now, qi, this term qi, it's translated as surprise tactics because qi literally means strange, unusual, all right? Uncanny, different, etc. All right? So in this case, it just means you use it. So Lao Tzu is also saying, on the other hand, okay, so he's contrasting the two, all right? The first two phrases, the two is, one is when you rule a country, you do it with integrity, right? But when you're using military, when you have to, fight, it's a little bit different. It's using surprise, okay, or you can say different different methods than the way you govern a country. All right, so that yeah, it complements the first phrase. That is, when you utilize the military, you do not want to be transparent, okay? Because it's not the best tactical strategy for direct, say head-to-head or symmetric warfare. That's what they call it technically. Clash, which leads to a war of attrition. So it's different, right? So it's different than governing a country. It's a little bit different. It's you want to use surprise or different means than, integrity, transparency, stuff like that, fairness or whatever. All right. Okay. So additional meaning is rather you use creativity, okay, such as in attack and defense that lets the kingdom achieve more with less. The idea is you don't want to use all of your kingdom's resources, when you're using the military, right? So example, using the element surprise to defeat a larger force, all right? So you want to do or maximize your effect with the least amount of resources or energy, okay? Especially in war, all right? Okay. Now, how does that apply to the individual level? Individual level, it just means making use of creativity in your life, dealing with contention, issues or problems with yourself, your family, work, society, etc. Okay, so at the individual level. So you want also to apply creativity, all right? Okay. Okay, so the another way of looking at it is the military is a metaphor. Okay, military is, yeah, it means, using the, I don't know, the army, the Navy, Air Force, that's military. Yeah, that's fine. But it's actually, it should be broader, okay? It's a metaphor for attacking a problem or project. It just means that when you have issues, problems that arise, crises, etc., disasters, whatever, okay? So the creative thinking helps you to achieve more of less. So instead of just working harder, you may be able to work smarter with a creative, innovative solution, okay? So the military, so when Lao Tzu is talking about military, doesn't, just mean, using fighting a war. Okay, so that's not what Lao Tzu is saying. Yes, on a very narrow understanding, that's correct. That's not wrong. Because nations, unfortunately, sometimes they end up going to war, right? They sometimes have to defend themselves, etc., whatever. But it also means, in general, just means any type of crises or issues, problems that arise. That's what it also means. Okay, so Lao Tzu is saying, general, on a broader level, anytime there's a problem, either crises, problems, or issues that arise either at the country level, not the kingdom level, or at the individual level. Okay, so that's what that means. Okay, all right. So another way of qi, or the strange or unusual or uncanny, it just means there's creative and innovative methods. Okay, so that means there are usually more than one way to solve a particular problem, issue, or etc. Okay, usually, okay, there are different ways. Okay, so that's what the creative means. Okay, so that there's more than one problem. More than one solution to any given problem. Okay, the second meaning is that it just means that one should maintain an open mind. One should not have a rigid mind, right? Rigid, just inflexible mind. But one should have an open mind for, new approaches, for different type of approaches. Okay, so it's usually a closed mind that prevents one from seeing a different approach or out of the box approach. So it's better to ask what if, suppose, etc., etc. What if instead of this doing that? Okay, so that's what creative could also mean, right? That you have a very flexible, unrigid, non-rigid, or in mind. Okay, so not a rigid mind. Okay, or mindset. All right. Now, the third phrase, the last phrase, is take the world, okay, with non-interference. Okay, what does that mean? Take the world. All right, take the world. Okay, well, let's see. Not 无视 means, we've encountered this phrase before. I believe it's in chapter 48. 48. We've came across it. I think it's 48. Yeah, 48 in the middle of the chapter. Okay. All right. So anyway, okay. So what's to take the world? Okay. So at the kingdom level, take the world means the kingdom expands and becomes, a big empire, a powerful, state. And the non-interference means the kingdom has a natural vitality, like a living organism. Okay, yeah. So it's you're granting organic attributes to a non-living entity. Okay, the kingdom. Right. What it means is this: just in any type of organizational level. Okay, this gets into maybe group psychology or social psychology, but any type of a group level like setting, or like in this case a kingdom, which is a group, a collection, a group of society or people. They have their own, how can I say, their own vitality, their own rhythm, their own life, quote unquote, as like that. Okay, so it means to take care of the basics and let it grow naturally by removing anything that constrains, harms, or obstructs its natural growth and development. That's what it means. And where that natural vitality will express itself as power and strength, all of which progresses in a natural way. So that's in any type of group dynamic. It's like that. So like you can probably see it a lot. It could be like in a family level. family, okay? You have a group dynamic, you have a group of individuals, right? With, either, different ways of thinking, etc., behavior, but, there's a group dynamic involved, okay? And the key is how do you want to make it harmonious or maintain stability and harmony, and harmony, and that's how the group or that group dynamic will develop and grow. And that's the natural byproduct. Same as in a workspace, at work, you have a department or a group of individuals that's working together, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the same. So similarly, on a kingdom level, all right? Okay. So another way to do is at the kingdom level, so you do away with things, that means it could be policies, laws, rules, whatever, okay, that hinders, limits, or harms the growth, development, and strength of the kingdom. So, all right, so that's at the kingdom level. At the personal level, to take the world means living up to your potential in your world. That is, your life, your destiny, etc. To optimize your potential and expand your lives. Okay, our lives. Another meaning is similar to the kingdom level, your life also has a natural vitality. So by taking care of the basics, you set up a system that works well for you by removing complexity and leaving a framework. That is, a framework could be a model or, a set of guidelines, etc. All right, principles. That's easy, simple and easy to follow. So this phrase really is an reiteration of a similar line, one who takes the world by constantly applying non-interference. That's chapter 48. Okay, all right. So there's a deeper meaning of non-interference. It means non-conditioned. Okay, it means it's non-interference, non-conditioned. Let everything function and develop naturally in accordance with the Tao. Okay, so that's a deeper meaning. Okay, so deeper understanding. Upright integrity comes from within yourself and radiates outward, right? Remember chapter 52, right? Well established. That's how we do it in those circles. 54, chapter 54. Okay, we have those circles, right? The expanding Tao that radiate outward. First, cultivate the Tao in yourself, and the virtue shall be what? True, right? And then the next level is cultivate the Tao in your family, and the virtue shall be abundant in your family, right? So that's chapter 54. Okay, what's that? So it's the same thing, all right? So it's not something that's externally imposed on you. So it doesn't come from the outside, okay? All right? It comes from within you. Okay, so reducing complexity and return to the simplicity of the Buddha nature essence. The ultimate creativity comes from the unlimited divine wisdom of our Buddha nature essence. Okay, that's where the ultimate creativity comes from. Okay, all right, it comes from our Buddha nature essence. Okay, so the higher, another way to understand is the highest and purest upright integrity comes from our Buddha nature essence. So non-interference comes from the simplicity of the nameless. Yeah, chapter 37, way back. Remember? Okay. And it comes from living your life in accordance with the Buddha nature essence by being at one with the Tao, okay, embracing the Tao. Okay, implication is non-interference means do not persist in trying to fix things or tinker with things that are already working properly, because natural improvements happen when you're not constantly being interrupted. Okay, so don't fix something it's not broken, right? Okay, same idea. All right, so the key is okay, there's at the kingdom level, rulers should govern with integrity, fairness, goodness, and transparency while employing creative, innovative, and non-conventional methods when using the military or confronting any problem, okay, and removing anything that hinders, limits, or harms the country, all right? At the personal level, okay, one should live a life of integrity, honesty, modesty, and trustworthiness while applying creativity, that is, using our Buddha nature wisdom to resolve contentions and problems in life by reducing complexity and return to simplicity. All right. Okay. All right. So that includes, you can say flowing with or be in harmony with our karma, etc. Okay. So that can mean, okay. So it's similar in, now this is very similar to parts, of chapter 3, going way, 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 way back. All right. So it says, wise rulers do not glorify the achievers, dot, 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 there's more. Okay. Do not treasure things that are difficult to attain, dot, 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 do not show the desired thing. It's section 1, okay, of chapter 3, all right, peace or security for the people. Okay. And here's, I don't know, just a reminder, if you've seen chapter 3 way, way back, all right? So now, Lao Tzu in chapter 3 wasn't talking about governance at this point, okay, at that in chapter 3. He's more generic, okay? So he's saying, do not glorify the achievers, so people will not attend. Do not treasure things that are difficult, so people will not become thieves. Do not show desired things, so people's mind will not be confused. So he's just laying out general principles, okay? Saying, now it's this chapter was not specifically talking about rulers, but it could apply to rulers too, or an individual, right? He's just addressing it to them. So just, so he had reasons for saying, these things, okay? Because it has consequences, okay? So that is the consequence. If you glorify, the achievers or the elite, the people who are special, whatever, then people will become jealous or envious. It becomes you're segregating society or people between the haves and the not haves, as example, okay, or stuff like that. People who are achievers or not achievers, etc. And that's where then you're just discriminating, you're differentiating, okay, and then that's where it will lead to contention. Same thing with treasuring things that are difficult to attain. It could be, actually, rare things or even common things, okay, all right, that are difficult. Then people, well, what? Well, they'll crave it, right? They'll want to crave it. So then some people can't do it through quote unquote ethical means, then they have to do it by other means. And that's how you lead to thieves and stuff, okay? And same thing with the desires, okay? Desires starts from within your mind, right? So if you, start pointing to things or displaying things that are desirable, or start saying, oh, this is desirable, this is not desirable, then that's going to mess up people's minds. And then that's where we're going to start a whole host of, okay? So that's chapter 3's, that goes way back, okay? So chapter 3 is more general. Now, this is a little bit more specific here, okay? But the same principle applies, all right? Okay, so let's go to section 2. He's saying, with what do I know this is so? Or how do I know this is so? With the following, okay? So 此 is the following, okay? Or this, it means this too, okay? So the basic meaning is, with what do I know this is the case? He's talking about the previous three phrases, all right? Okay. So the basic meaning of last phrase, this, it just means that he's introducing you, connecting you to the next 2 sections, especially the section 2, okay? The section 2, next 8 phrases, okay? So another meaning of the last phrase, the flow of this section 2 is as follows, where Lao Tzu is pointing out, 1, best way to rule a kingdom, okay? 2, the best way to use the military or solve a problem, crises, etc. And the best way to let the kingdom grow or prosper, develop and grow. So he asks, how do I know that these are the best ways? How to do the 1, 2, 3, the first 3 steps. So he begins by listing the following negative factors, and then conclude in section 3 the positive factors and the results that tie back, okay, to section 1. All right, so that's what this intro, this phrase, this line means. Okay, all right. So here's the so with the following, the following. So the following, this is going to be the beginning of the first of 8. Let's do the first 4 phrases of the 8 phrases. Okay. So what it's saying is, at least the first 4 phrases is saying, when there are many restrictions in the world, the people become more impoverished. So when people have many sharp weapons, the country becomes more chaotic. All right. Okay. So let's tackle the first 2 phrases. So basic meaning of the first phrase is, when the world, this is pretty basic, is when the world is under tyrannical or oppressive rule with many restrictions. Okay. Okay. Doesn't mean it's, it could, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be an authoritarian regime. Okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Okay. It could be a democracy, or quote unquote democracy, okay, too. All right. Okay. So it just means that there's a country that has many restrictions. Okay. It could be a lot of laws, but that's the next second half. But anyway, so what happens if you have lots of restrictions? It's very oppressive, right? People's lives become, both on a material level and spiritual level, poor, becomes impoverished. Okay, so not as intuitive in terms of material, but in fact it's the case. Okay, it just means that if you have lots of rules or laws that can hinder either the economic growth, right, or the economic prosperity of people. Example, an obvious example would be taxation, which I'll get to. But anyway, so the restrictions, the you can say the rules, the laws, or whatever, include not just actions, but opinions or words that are opposed to the rulers. So, restriction doesn't just have to be economically, political, right? It could be social, religious even, right, etc. Okay, or political. Now this time we said political, that were people that are opposed to the rulers, for example. Okay, so that's an example of a restriction, right? There's no opposition. You can't have oppose the ruling class or the ruler, right? So it's more, you can say it's like a monarchy or dictatorship. Example. That's very extreme. Okay, but extreme examples. But in modern times, so this is called totalitarianism. It could be authoritarianism, dictatorship, fascism, etc. I mean, this is very, very narrow, very extreme. So, but anyway, historically, we've seen that heavy-handed rule, dictatorships, or very single person type of rule has usually worked out badly for the country, for the people, for everyone. Okay, usually. I mean that throughout history we could see that, right? We have seen that. So it's this is one extreme. So Lao Tzu just pointing out that that type of rule of a country or a kingdom, it's not the best way, because that's kind of extreme, right? It's very extreme. And if you go to extremes, then that's not the way of the Tao, and that's why they don't last, right? They end they end early. I mean they die early, right? They go away early. All right. Okay. So what's the restrictions? Okay, restrictions can be in many areas or many types. So one type is this: restrictive laws, regulation, rules. So you don't have to be a totalitarian regime to have restricted. I mean, you could democracy could have that too. Okay, so that's why too many laws, regulations, and rules are not good. It's not, Lao Tzu's not saying that you should not have no laws or any laws or regulation. He's not saying that. He's just saying that if you have too much, okay, so he's talking about remember the yin and yang, the extremes, okay? Don't go to either extreme. You can't have no laws or no rules and no regulation. Everything goes, right? That's impossible too. Now, the only case that could be true is if everybody is enlightened. Yeah, if everybody's a Buddha, there's no need to impose rules, regulations, etc. Right? But that's not the case, right? Okay, so because we're talking about human beings, okay, we're not talking about the Buddha land or Buddha world, okay, Buddha kingdom, okay. So laws are the most broad and general level of the country, right? Regulations are specific guides or rules created by, either government agencies or whoever officials to enforce the laws. And rules can be formal, informal. They incorporate social customs, norms, traditions, etc. So when there are restrictive laws, regulation, it results in a stifling, oppressive environment. Okay, so that's why it's not good. All right, so that's how people can be more impoverished. Okay, all right. So that's what it means. Restrictive laws. Okay, so the different levels. So we can say law is the broadest, regulations more specific, and rules is even more narrow. Okay, so all right. So when what people are allowed to express, that's another restriction type of restriction, right? People are allowed to praise the ruling class, but not allowed to express. So at least in the United States, you have the Constitution, the what's that? The Bill of Rights. You have the freedom to assemble, freedom of the press, etc. So freedom of religious belief, etc. Okay. So that's that's an example of so we've seen many authoritarian regimes, etc., present and in history where this this applies, okay, that people cannot be opposed to the ruler, etc., okay, or cannot express dissent or disagreement. Okay, another is what people are allowed to keep after taxes. Now, this cuts across all types of quote unquote political environments or political systems, right? So, if you have very high taxation, so in ancient China too, sometimes they have regimes or kings or emperors who impose very high taxes, okay, on the people, very oppressive form of taxes, and that also kept people poor. Okay, so now in other countries too, even today, even in democratic countries, the tax rates are different, right? So in some European countries, tax rates are very high because they have a quote unquote, we say, social model, which social economy, which is in some ways it benefits the country, the people more broadly, but they use higher taxation rates to help fund those social programs, services, etc. But in the U.S., right, we complain our tax rates are, we say are pretty high. It's pretty high. It's just ironic. It's pretty high on we call the middle income. Relatively, it's relative, of course. I mean, but it's pretty low on the higher income. It's just kind of, upside down because you hear stories, right? How these wealthy class, because and this leads to the next second half. Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay, anyway, I don't want to get into this too much right now, but it's you hear especially some rich people, they're tax loopholes. That's the question. And also even though nominally that means their tax rate for the higher income, especially the super wealthy, nominally it's still relatively high compared to the moderate middle income class. And there's less than middle income class is 25%. For example, using example, the top 1% class or the high, because it's a progressive tax system, that means the tax rate goes up progressively as your income goes higher. Okay, so this is the nominal. Okay, the what's in the tax code. that, so if you're the super rich, wealthy, high income, your tax rate, well, previously was up to 50%, I think, during the Johnson or Kennedy periods. But anyway, it was up to 50, but now it's like 30 something percent. So that's the nominal. So you would think that, yeah, that's fair because the rich have higher, so they should pay, 37, 35, whatever percent of their income. But actually, because of tax loopholes, there are a lot of exceptions, and that's where complexity comes in. The tax code is very complex. I'll get to that in the second half, but they have loopholes, So like, for example, the passive income versus active income, that's another loophole, but that's an exception. Passive income, which a lot of wealthy, because they don't have, they quote unquote work, but most of their wealth is generated through passive income, or which is, what's passive income? It's the income, quote unquote, that you generate from non-work activities, meaning stuff like stock investments, real estate investments, stuff like that. I'm not a CPA, but that's how the U.S. tax code is. So therefore, if you get most of your income from those quote unquote non-work activities, or stuff like stock market or something, your tax rate drops to like less than 10% or 10%, whatever. It's pretty low. Okay, so that's where so if you're the super wealthy like a Warren Buffett, most of his income, wealth comes from those type of activities. Yeah, he works, but he only, if his regular job, I think he's the chairman or something or whatever it is, he maybe gets $1 million a year or whatever I'm using. Okay, so the tax rate on that alone would be, 37, 30, whatever percent. But 99% of his income comes from stock market investments, real estate, etc. And they get taxed only maybe at 10%. So you've heard the story, right? Warren Buffett was famously quoted at times. He says, his tax rate, his net effective tax rate, that's when you combine everything, right? He said he's lower than his secretaries, which kind of, it's kind of like upside down, right? Secretaries only makes, I don't know, 1%, 5% of what he's making, income-wise, and yet gets taxed at a higher effective rate than what he is when he makes 10 times more or 100 times more, whatever. So it's kind of ironic, right? So anyway, so that's the problem. Okay, and then the last point is the results gets very, intrusive. Okay, so I don't want to go. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so at a personal level, so that's at the kingdom level. Very restrictive rules, etc. Okay, so what are the restrictions? So as a ruler of yourself, these are constraints, limitations, restrictions that are self-imposed, not the key at the self level, self-imposed. Okay, at the personal level, not from outside. Yeah, they're outside, but that's at the kingdom level. Okay, so self-imposed. Example: self-imposed constraining beliefs like I can't, I don't know, I'm not that good, or I don't want to learn, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to try this. Okay, stuff like that. So that's a self-limiting attitude, or giving up easily self-defeating. So that's self-imposed. All right. Okay, or dogmatic, inflexible, rigid beliefs can take many forms. It could be a bias or prejudice. So like a certain group of people may not have what it takes to do something, so they may be described as being unfit for success. Oh, that group of people, they're, whatever. Okay, so they're not smart enough, they're not capable enough. They just lack certain abilities to do that, so they're not, they're unfit. So that's the way, we human mind work. Okay, so unfit for independence, so they're incapable of success, etc. All right, now this is similar to the five sharp views. Okay, one of them is the view of the self, the first one. That's the key. Okay, and then there's rigid views too, rigid beliefs. Okay, all right. Okay, it's more specific, the five sharp views, but it's similar idea. Okay, now this is very different now from the concept of self-discipline, where self-discipline now we're saying, oh yeah, well, it's impose constraints, limitations, or restrictions. That's what Lao Tzu is saying. That's negative, but that's different from self-discipline. Okay, so self-discipline is something that you put on yourself in order to improve yourself, not to live in yourself. Get it? Okay, so that's the difference between self-imposed restrictions or constraints or limitations versus self-discipline. Okay, self-discipline is something that you put on yourself in order to make yourself better. That's different. Okay, so like, you're disciplined in, let's say, I don't know, eating properly. You don't, or getting enough rest, or doing exercises, etc. So that's that's to improve your health. Okay, etc. Okay, all right. Now, there's a story that they use in Zen Buddhism. Okay, it's called the Dharma of spiritual release, or 解脱的法门. I mean, you can say liberation, but it's spiritual liberation. It's not. Okay, so that's a story between the third patriarch of Zen Buddhism in China. That's Sun Can, right? That's his name. Sun Can, and Dao Xing, who later became the fourth patriarch. Okay, but this story is when the third patriarch, was still around and was still, you can say, teaching the Dharma, while Dao Xing was still very young. The story is about that time. Okay, he's not yet the fourth patriarch. Okay, that comes much later. Okay, so let's go to Appendix B. Okay, well, what's the story? Okay, okay. The story is very short. It goes something like this. Okay, it's Dao Xing, the future fourth patriarch. He's a very interesting character, person. I mean, he entered. Now this just goes to show, we can say that's karma, or that's his previous cultivation, or that he planted the seed, so that in roughly 1500 years ago, 1450, roughly during the time of the early time, the pre Tang Dynasty era, or Sui Dynasty, or the Northern Southern Dynasty period. Okay, roughly 500 Common Era. Okay, 500, 550, 5 to 600 Common Era. But anyway, Dao Xing, he was very young when he entered the monastery, when he became a monk, by the way. So he was like, I don't know, 6 or 7, something like that, 6 or 7 years old when he entered the monastery to become a monk. Okay, so this story happened when he was like around 14, 15. So it's about 6, 7 years after he entered the monastery. And he was a very smart, pretty bright person. And he read all the Buddha sutras, teachings, etc. But he also has a lot of questions. So one day, Dao Xing had the opportunity to meet Sun Can, the third patriarch. Okay, when third patriarch visited his monastery. Okay, the monastery that Dao Xing was in. And Dao Xing, the third patriarch Sun Can was teaching dharmas, etc. Okay, so one day after one of those teachings, Dao Xing approached Sun Can and asked him, Master, I've read all the sutras, but I'm still confused, or I'm still not yet, I don't fully understand them yet completely. And isn't there, I've read all the sutras, but I can't find where in the sutras is there a specific, exact, precise dharma that tells us to, or teaches us, teaches us to become completely spiritually liberated. So, because Dao Xing that time he was young, he was like 14 years old, but he's still a smart guy, okay, smart kid. He read, but so this ties back to that self-limitation, okay, the whole idea behind that. Dao Xing asked, so the third patriarch Shen Can asked Dao Xing, well, is there anything? Is somebody that's tying you down or holding you back or anything? Is that what the problem is? The cause? And Dao Xing replies, no, nobody is, restricting me or limiting me or imposing limitations on me. Okay, then yeah, then and so he was wondering why the third patriarch is asking him that. And the third patriarch then responded, says, well, if no one or nothing is imposing their limitations on you or restricting you, then what is it? Why is it that you say you cannot find in the spiritual release? Who's holding you back then? Then what's holding you back, or who's holding you back? If you say nobody is, so then that's when Dao Xing, he's a smart guy, He realized. That's his realization. So that's where he finally understood that he was the one that's imposing restrictions on himself. Okay, that spiritual release. Okay, that it's himself. So the key. So what Shen Can was trying to tell Dao Xing is that, actually, it's all this restriction, or quote unquote, these either, in this case it's mental, it's not physical, right? It's not physical restriction. It's this mental restriction that we impose on ourselves, but it's our human mind that's doing that. It's not the Buddha nature. The Buddha nature, nothing, the Buddha nature, it's not quote unquote limited, right? It's unrestricted, right? It's okay, cannot be, okay? So he's talking about the true nature, the self nature, or the original nature, the Buddha nature, the nature that you always had and will always have. So it is the constant change in this immutable self nature that is the ineffable you. Now, ineffable means what? Simple definition is just means indescribable. Okay, Chinese is 不可思议. Okay, it's the indescribable you, because talking about the Buddha nature essence. Remember in chapter 56 we talked about that, right? To attain the unattainable, because what? What was that thing? Those who know do not talk, right? Those who talk do not know. Same idea, okay? Same. So, and that Buddha nature essence, the self nature, the true nature, the true you remains pure, original, no matter how much you change physically, right? Obviously. So your true self is never truly restricted by anything. So that's what Shen Can was trying to, quote unquote, teach, unquote, Dao Xing, that, when you have these either questions or confusions, it's your human mind that's restricting yourself. It's not your self nature. All right. Okay. So in life, the illusions of the material world can be misleading, right? And that's the case, right? We have when we look at this material world, there are things, right? So why do we think we're restricted? Because we are confused by the illusions, which is what? The six roots, the six desires, the cravings, the attachments. We imagine or think we are constrained and limited by these external factors or personal or things. So we seek the Dharma of spirituality. So because we are using our mind, our sixth consciousness, right? The sixth consciousness. And we interact, use those our six senses and the six roots to interact with the physical, the material world. we then come up with thoughts, right? Ideas that we think or we imagine that we are being constrained or something, okay? Then, because of that, we say, oh, I want to seek the Dharma of spiritual release. So what Sen Can, the third patriarch, was trying to tell Dao Xing, that don't rely on that the mental sixth consciousness. Rather, what you are already liberated. You are already spiritual, and that is your Buddha nature, essence, the self nature, the true nature. Okay, so there's no need to seek the Dharma spiritual release. Yeah, that's a high. So right, remember Diamond Sutra, right? So the Buddha said to Shibuti, did I attain that Dharma of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, the Anodoro Samyak Samputi? No, he didn't attain it. He already had it. It's your Buddha nature. It's just to remove all those mental barriers, limitations that we impose on ourselves. And so another way of saying, like lecture like to say, is 妄愿放下，一念不生. That's the key. If you let go of all your karmic affinities, relinquish them, and do not let a single thought arise. That means do not let your mind control you. Your conscious mind, your sixth conscious. Then what's left? Your Buddha nature essence will show itself. That's true liberation. That's the liberating part. Okay. All right. So in reality, we are only limited by ourselves. Okay. So some factors may be circumstance. We say, yeah, we're limited. Some people are born handicapped or whatever. Okay. Or, whatever. Okay. But they too are illusions, because that's just material side, because they arise due to causal factors, karma, causality, which are always changing. Even causal factors are changing. So we are only limited by our self-imposed restrictions. So it is not anyone or anything that has imposed restriction on us. Okay, it's not that. So when we go to a deeper level within ourselves, we'll realize at some point we have accepted those self-imposed restrictions due to the worldly illusions and end up therefore impoverished in our lives, both materially and spiritually. So when we limit ourselves, we don't even try anymore. That's how we become impoverished. Okay. Therefore, our lives become even more impoverished. Okay. So because we are the ones who accepted the self-imposed, we also have the power to evoke that acceptance. And that's where Dao Xing became enlightened. Okay. That's when that was his first spiritual awakening, if you will. And that's how eventually he became enlightened and became the fourth patriarch. Okay. So he understood what the third patriarch Sen Can was telling him now. That hey, if there's nobody that's holding back, then what's holding you back? So, it's your own mind, conscious mind that's accepting. Okay, so then if it's that, then you can also do the reverse and not allow, right, that acceptance. Okay, so when we revoke that blind acceptance to limit or restrict us, we have the Dharma. That's when we have the Dharma of spiritual. So that's to attain the unattainable. That's from chapter 56, right? We talked about that. So that's when we revoke, or you can say relinquish. Yeah, relinquish your ego, relinquish the thinking mind, which is kind of like counterintuitive, right? Because we already accept that, hey, it's our mind that's in charge. Well, guess what? Those are just functions, applications of actually our Buddha nature essence, right? Get it? Okay, so that's not the true self, your mind, your consciousness, all right? Okay, so that's when you have the spiritual release. Okay, so all it takes is the realization that there is no one or nothing that's tying us down. Why do we tie ourselves up in these artificial or delusional reasons? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's the story of Sen Can. Okay, so that's okay. All right. Okay, so so that's the second phrase. Okay, so now let's go to that's the first phrase. Okay, basic meaning of second phrase. What's the second phrase? It's the people become more impoverished. Okay, so in the kingdom level, there are different ways. Okay, so such as bureaucratic restrictions, so that places burdens on people. Okay, and taxation, and we talked a little bit about that already. The higher tax rate, the poorer the people becomes, right? Okay, and because of the above, people then lose faith in the ruler, and then in turn, the ruler loses the support of the people, and then historically, this has been the precursor or the harbinger of the fall of empires or dynasties. Okay, so that's the 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 mechanics, okay, of impoverished at the kingdom level. Okay, now at the personal level, in the personal case, impoverished means not living up to your potential. So it is opposite of taking the world, the third phrase of section 1. All right, taking the world of, excuse me, of you know governing your life, your destiny, or your fulfill your destiny or your full potential. Okay, so what does that mean? That when we become impoverished, we live only in our comfort zone. That leads to never venturing out, never trying anything new, or limited or no possibility of learning or exploring. True happiness and joy happens when we learn something new, right? So that's why we that's one way of being impoverished. Or limiting your mind, excuse me, limiting your mind with inflexible beliefs, rigid views, dogmas, delusions, part of the five king views, okay? We never expand our horizons. Our perspective still remains narrow. Okay, so that's how we become impoverished too. Our life becomes poor because you never explored or learned anything new, never expanded your horizons, and your vision and your views remain narrow. So additional meaning is your life is poor because you never make the attempt to push the envelope. You missed the opportunity to experience the joy of discovering and learning new things, of going beyond what you thought you could do. All right. So that's how you become impoverished. Okay. Further understanding is this is very different from the concept of self-discipline. Right. Okay. Well, I want to reiterate that. Where you want to discipline yourself to become better so you can overcome what you thought was your limitation. That's what self-discipline is. Okay. So self-discipline is the opposite of living within your comfort zone or having rigid views. I don't want to go too much time on this diagram. It just basically a summary, okay, of okay this is at the kingdom level. We say people become more impoverished. It's really kingdom. Okay, the kingdom. So there are more laws, rules, restriction, more taxation in ruling the kingdom. That means people will toil under greater burdens, and people keep less, because more taxation. So that's just the. And then at the personal level, right? Okay, your self-imposed beliefs or dogmatic beliefs, when you're ruling your life, you end up impoverished because you never try. So you never fail or succeed. Yeah, you definitely never fail because you never try anything. But you won't succeed either because you haven't tried something different, something new, okay? Or go beyond what your rigid views are or whatever, okay? And your views of the world still remains narrow, very limited. So that's why how you end up being impoverished also, okay? So let's continue. Okay, long time, darn. Okay, basic meaning. We're talking about the last two phrases of this. People become more, sorry, when people have many sharp weapons, country becomes more chaotic. All right, so there's the basic meaning. It just means that, when you literally have weapons, that's the physical weapons, physical objects at their disposal, okay? Another meaning for for weapons is the sharp weapons are a metaphor for verbal weapons, such as a tongue lashing. That's to accuse, to blame, to scold people. Okay, the sharp tongue, right? Okay, to open your mouth. Okay, so that's what also means. Okay, at that personal level, it's metaphorical. Okay, so the three C's, right? Complaining, condemning, criticizing, etc. You got to be careful of that. Okay, those are the sharp weapons at a personal level. The more of these verbal weapons you have, the more negative things become. Leads to broken families, friendships, etc. Okay, all right. So, and then when people have many sharp weapons, what's the consequence? The country becomes more chaotic. Okay, so regardless of the time period or scope in the kingdom to the personal level, this general principle applies. That is, the more weapons, in this case, it could be physical, actual weapons, or the 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 sharp tongue, the mouth that we have, the more violence and chaos there's going to be. All right. So that's a general principle. So another way of saying, with greater chaos, whether on the kingdom or personal, people will be harmed. Okay. So that's a negative consequence. Okay. So additional meaning is at a personal level, heated discussions. When we have these sharp weapons, during heated discussions will often turn into all-out arguments. Okay. At a kingdom or society level, disputes can turn into confrontations. First, fistfights can turn into shootouts, or national disagreements can turn into wars. Okay, so that's the negative results or consequences with more weapons. Okay, now the weapons can be metaphorical. Okay, it doesn't just mean guns or swords, etc. So with easy access at the kingdom level, for example, present, with easy access to more and more guns, there'll be more and more shootings in the country, resulting in more chaos, violence, and fear in society. Some claim that the more guns there are, the safer the society. This does not pass the reality test. More weapons, a more harmonious society does not make, but do create a more violent society. Okay, so it's violent society does make. Okay, just look at the U.S. We have so many guns. As a matter of fact, I think we have more guns than people. But anyway, okay, so that's wow. Okay, anyway, all right. So, all right, okay. So at the personal level, though, okay, here it is. It's the more restrictions represent the more inflexible and rigid views that rise from the ego. The more verbal weapons mean to weaponize our communication against other people, the sharp tongue, the 3 C's, okay? So the more it will become chaotic for you, because to open one's mouth will cause more negativity and harm, right? We call chapter 56, 52, close the mouth, right? Why Lao Tzu stresses to close the mouth, right? Don't open your mouth. Meaning, it means that you can't, it's not that you don't talk, but you have to be very careful, okay, of what you say, and actually you should talk less and do more. Okay, so that's those previous 2 chapters talk about. Okay, so the implication is the more restrictive the laws, regulations, or rules, the more the taxation rate, for example, the more the restrictions on people expressing their voices, the more intrusive the government becomes, the more materially and spiritually impoverished the people and society become. So that's at the, you can say, society kingdom level. The more weapons, that's the physical and verbal aspect, right? The more negativity, chaos, and violence. Okay, so the key is Tao cultivators must break free of self-imposed limitations, the inflexible, rigid views, in order to gain spiritual freedom and release, but must not spark contention with other people with verbal weapons, open the mouth, which will lead to personal and social chaos. That's the opposite of harmony. Okay, so now let's go to the second half of section 2. So when people have many clever tricks, more strange things appear. The more laws are posted, the more robbers and thieves there are. Okay, so that seems counterintuitive, but it's not really. It's really not. Okay, so just having more weapons, physical and verbal, can lead to more chaos. Having more tricks may not be a good thing at the kingdom and personal. Now, tricks, actually, this is translated tricks. This, okay, that's what this means. Okay, it literally, it means skill, craftsmanship, also technique, skill, cunning, but also clever tricks. So in this, we translate to clever tricks because it's meant to be negative. That's what I'm saying. So a skill, craftsmanship is not negative in general. I mean, it's neutral. It could be neutral, but in this case, it's used in the negative context because it's in a sense of shrewdness, shortcuts, schemes, calculating, cunning mind, etc., which are all rooted in some form of deceit, okay, or deception. So in this case, this clever tricks or this cunning or is rooted or is connected to something that's deceitful or deceptive. Okay, all right. So that's the negative. Okay, so it's the negative context. Okay, so another meaning is at a kingdom level. In an oppressive society, right? People will use clever tricks to evade control, right, or to break free, right, from that oppression, right? So that makes sense, right? Yeah, people will use tricks, deception, whatever. Okay, so at the society level, in the material world, people will use clever tricks to get ahead, right? If I can't earn it properly, I'll do something else. Okay, I'll do, if I can't get it, following the normal path or whatever, normal means, I'm gonna use, sneaky ways or different ways, different tactics. Okay, so tricks are this, so that's where clever tricks or cunning, okay, comes into play. So note that tricks are deceptive in nature and not the same as creative solutions. Okay, so there's a difference. Okay, once again, all right, just like self-discipline and self-imposed limitations or restrictions. Okay, so same thing with tricks versus creativity. Right? Okay, so creative at the personal level, creative solutions occur when you find a better way of doing something that can produce equal better results. It is a more efficient way, a more intelligent method, a way that makes more sense. So that's positive. It's like doing more with less, right? That's creativity. While clever tricks, in this case, shrewdness, schemes, and shortcuts are the easy way out. You don't do the work, you're just finding a shortcut. So that's the negative. So that's the clever tricks versus creativity or innovative way. Okay, so that's a difference. All right. Okay. So the second phrase is more strange things appear. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so when we say what strange things, now what Lao Tzu is trying to say, strange things is meant to be negative. Just they're not normal. They're abnormal. They're not normal, not usual, not typical. Okay, so that's what it means by that. So when things are not normal, abnormal, whatever, that's negative. Okay, so when people use clever tricks, then negative things or consequences, unintended consequences, will occur. So for example, this is because tricks are often used to what? One, take advantage of the naive and gullible people, such as grifting or scams or pyramid schemes, etc., right? Or to sabotage those who are not vigilant against these tricks, such as your email got hacked, phished, or ID theft, etc. And it's also clever tricks usually is meant to what? Perpetuate a fraud, bank fraud, insurance fraud, etc. Right? Okay, so at the kingdom level, the more clever tricks there are, the more the people are harmed, in this case, financially, okay? Just like being hurt or killed by weapons, right? By physical weapons, okay? But at the personal level, what does that mean? The more clever tricks you have, the more harm you will do to others. And in the end, more negativity for yourself. Strange things will happen, okay? So will occur. All right, so let's look at the last two phrases. The more laws are posted, the more robbers and thieves there are, right? So at the kingdom level, okay, well, so we already talked about the restrictive laws, but the another example, not only do restrictive laws become oppressive and therefore suppress, people, spiritually or even materially, but also the more laws there are, now this doesn't have to be restrictive laws or oppressive laws, just in general, okay? The more laws there are, the more complexity it is. So this is contrary to reducing complexity and the Tao simplicity, right? The Tao, the simplicity, the simplicity of the nameless, right? So the Tao, Lao Tzu did not say the complexity of the nameless. He didn't use that word. He didn't say complex. He didn't say Tao is complex, okay? That's the complex Tao. He's always saying it's the simple Tao, okay? It's the simplicity, okay, the Tao, all right? Okay, all right, so another way is that there are intended consequences with having more laws. Okay, here's an example. Okay, complex laws cannot avoid invariably have loopholes. That's the problem with complexity. When you have, especially in laws, or anything for that matter, complex systems, they have loopholes. Okay, so also existing laws may end up contradicting each other. So that's another result or unintended consequence of having complexity. Okay, so something that is illegal according to one law could be legal in another. Whoa, that's where we have. That's why having too many laws is not good. They could lead to these two consequences. That is, it could be contradictory, and they have loopholes. Okay, so another so attempts to close the loopholes and resolve contradictory laws may create additional new problems. Okay. Remember, I talked about the taxation, the tax loopholes. That's the problem. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Let me not talk that now. Okay. So further understanding, I'll talk that at this phrase. The more robbers and thieves there are. What does that mean? Oh, sorry, no, it's not. The more laws are there. Just like self-imposed restrictions, right? The more rules you make for yourself will result in clutter, complexity, and confusion. So that's why you want to keep things simple. Keep the principles simple. Keep the guidelines, the framework that we establish ourselves when we are governing our own lives. Keep them simple. Don't be complex. Don't make it too complex. Okay, because then that's where you end up confused. Now, let's talk about phrase about the kingdom law. What it seems that the more laws we have, the more criminals. It's kind of like an oxymoron, right? It's not intuitive. Okay, so now some may think that the more laws we have, it'll deter criminals or criminal activities. But this does not pass the reality test. It may be just the opposite. Okay, so when when laws become more complex, they do become more difficult to enforce at the same time. Okay, that's the result. Now, let's look at white-collar crimes, quote unquote. Like some people have figured out the loopholes in the complex laws and took advantage of them to evade the enforcement of those laws. For example, the U.S. tax code. Yeah, it contains more. It's like an encyclopedia. Okay, it has more than 2,600 pages. You could go to the library or order book online. It's called the U.S. Tax Code, whatever. It's usually in paperback. Okay, it's 2,600 pages long, and it's getting bigger, expanding every year or every session Congress and passing. But its sheer size. Oh yeah, we say we have a ton of tax laws. Yeah, a ton of tax codes. 2,600 pages worth. But that's sheer size. Did it reduce tax fraud? Has it ever reduced tax fraud? So by that logic, the more laws there are, or the more complex there are laws, okay, then we should reduce, tax fraud. We should have fewer tax cheats, right? But that's not the case. The reality is there are more tax laws. So the extremely wealthy who are able to take advantage of tax code loopholes to pay little or no taxes. Okay, so that's the problem with complexity in this example in the tax code. Okay, some countries, I think Singapore or whatever, some countries have very simple tax codes. They're only like, I don't know, a couple hundred pages or something like that. I forgot. They're very simple. And it seems to work. Okay, so anyway, so there's something. I mean, the problem, one of the reasons for the complexity of the tax codes, now I don't want to digress too much, but to give you an understanding, is that the U.S. government and public policy is that they try to build into, they try to build social policy. That's the problem, or public policy, not social, public policy into the tax code, and that's what makes it more complex. Okay, so that's the problem. They try to implement public policy via or through the tax code system, and that's why the tax code is so complex. Okay, so that's it's more a question of approach. Okay. So anyway, so it doesn't mean that there's less laws, because if they try to do public policy through other means outside of the tax code, it could also create more laws too. So anyway, just complexity. Okay, so that's one thing. Okay, so now the fourth phrase is, now at the personal level. What does that mean? There are more robbers and thieves. At the personal, I mean, what's that mean? It just means that you're robbing yourself of peace and joy, of having simplicity. Okay, you rob that simplicity, replace it with complexity. So when you do things to your own detriment, more schemes, remember clever tricks, shortcuts, shrewdness, cunning thoughts, you become your own criminal. Okay, so that's at the personal level. All right. So further understanding is that, or the last phrase is that the more complexity you make your life, the more you take away the ability to enjoy life. The more complexity you introduce into your life, the more you are likely to rob yourself of peace and joy, the less you enjoy life. Okay, so at the kingdom and personal levels, both levels, the best way to reduce the clever tricks and more laws is to simplify matters as much as possible. Okay, it doesn't mean to do away with it, just to simplify. The more there are shrewdness and laws, a harmonious and peaceful society does not make, right? So if we look at the diagram, okay, here, oops, here it goes. Okay, how do I know this? Okay, the kingdom level, okay, personal level. This applies to both levels, right? Okay, so how do I know this? Here, he's saying with the following. What's the following? Now, this is the negative side. Remember, we're in section 2. He's talking about the think about the yin and yang. First, talking about the yin aspect. That, how do I know this? He's saying, well, both at the kingdom and personal level, if you have too many restrictions, too many weapons, that's contention, that's the weaponized communication, too many clever tricks, too many laws. What are the negative consequences? The kingdom and you become impoverished, the kingdom and you become chaotic, confused, etc., or violent, etc. And at the kingdom level and you, negative things, strange things, means negative things or unintended consequences will happen, appear. And at the kingdom and level, if you have too many laws, at the kingdom and personal level, you have more criminals. Okay, so that's the summary. Okay. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so the higher understanding is that the personal level, the cleverness and the laws represent our attachments to clever, calculating, and cunning thoughts that arise from the interaction of our 6 portals and the 6 sense objects. That is our total reliance on our illusory mental thought processes instead of our Buddha nature wisdom. Ooh, why is it similar? This is wrong. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's what it means at the personal level. So the implication at the both levels, kingdom and personal, is the more clever tricks there are, cunning, okay, cunning thoughts, shrewdness there are, the more harm for society and you. The more laws there are, the more complexity and negativity for society and you. The more you try to use clever tricks to take shortcuts, the more you waste your time or run into dead ends. Okay. So at the kingdom level, okay, or personal level, the reverse is also true. So the more you simplify, the better everything gets. There's more happiness, energy, and peace of mind. By reducing our desires and attachments to our sense portals and relying on our mystic virtues, right? We talked about that, right? Mystic virtues, right? Okay. Okay. That is our Buddha nature wisdom, right? Okay. That's when what? The more we will return to what? Our plain, simple, original, natural, and tranquil state of Buddha nature essence. Okay. The mystic virtue, chapter 51, chapter 10, right? Okay, so we talked about that. Let's go to summary. Okay. All right. So 4 things to watch for in life. That's where we have to be mindful. Okay. Now these are the negative factors. Self-imposing limits. It leads to impoverished life. Weapons against others. Okay. Too much chaos, contrary to harmony. Shrewdness and shortcuts. cause strange problems, negative consequences. And too many rules, they rob you of peace and happiness. Okay, so that's where I'm getting feedback. Do you guys? Okay, anyway. All right, so let's go to the conclusion. Sorry, very long. Okay, so therefore, now this is the counterpoint to just the previous section that we talked about. So therefore, the sage says, I take unattached action. The people will transform themselves. I prefer quiescence or quietude, and the people right themselves. I do not interfere, and the people enrich themselves. I have no desires, and the people simplify themselves. There are different levels to this translation here. It can mean literally the literal mean here mean either at the kingdom level. The sage says I, in this case I being the ruler, you can say the ruler, okay, would do these things. But it also means you personally at the superficial level, and the higher level is your Buddha nature. Our Buddha nature, their actions are always unattached, get it? And they are always quietude or in stillness or tranquility. And they don't interfere. They don't project. They don't dominate. They don't, right? They don't do that, okay? They don't interfere. And they have no desires. So that's the highest level, okay? That's the more quote unquote metaphysical level, okay? All right, all right. Now, then the second half, we'll talk about that as we get through here because I'm sorry, I'm pressed for time. Okay, so basic meaning of the first phrase is I take unattached action. Okay, so it just means it's not referring to himself. Lao Tzu is not referring to, but he's talking about sages that came before him. Okay, so that's very basic. So this is about the previous generations who have taught the Tao, and he's learning from that. Now, the I also means, me, you, right? But it also means the ruler. Okay, so that just means, okay. Wu-wei, we've talked about that, so I don't want to talk about too much about it. Okay, so basic meaning of second phrase, which is what? The people transform themselves. So by taking unattached action. So let's say at the kingdom level, the ruler, they're taking unattached, meaning non-conditional or non-selfish, not selfish actions. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you can say non-selfish. Oh, not. You can say simple. Okay, just not complex things. Okay, so because actions with attachments lead to complexity. That's if you have actions with attachment, then you have contrivance, right? You have an agenda, you have an intent, right? So the more rules and more restrictions, okay, lead to complexity. More rules and more, because you have intention, right? You have certain agenda, right? So you have more rules, more restrictions. Then they come from human contrivance, from human designs. So they cannot be sustained for long. That's the problem. Okay. So non-attached actions of rulers mean the wise rulers would not try to impose complex rules in an attempt to make people behave. All right. Now, you have an agenda. Remember, I have an agenda. Let's say I have an agenda. Yeah, I want to have take action to to transform the people, to make the people become better. Okay, yes, so that's an intent. Okay, an agenda, an intent, but you should not use complexity, complex means. That's the key. Okay, you should just use simple. Okay, now another way to say it is the wise rulers establish basic principles and set themselves as examples or role models where they are also not exempt from the basic principle. They don't put themselves above those principles or rules, right? So the basic principles are simple yet effective systems which will guide people on the right path and allow the people to transform themselves, such as proportional. Now this is still in psychology now. I don't want to go into that, but proportional incentives, positive reinforcement, etc. People will emulate the rulers and transform themselves without being forced to, okay, well, without being imposed upon. All right, so that's the key. Okay, so you want to get the people. How do you get, if you as a ruler, how do you get the people to do what to transform them, to become better in this case. So you set up the general principles, you lay it up to everybody, and then you, the ruler yourself, follow them, do it, action, do it, walk the talk, and then people can learn from that. So, okay, besides being a ruler, you as the head of the family, same idea. Okay, same idea. All right. So, for the whole family, you want to teach filial piety. Well, guess what? Don't just talk about it. You yourself perform filial piety. Then your children can see that and learn from that, etc. Okay, I'm talking. Okay, example. Okay, so at the personal level, though, we can reduce complexity in our lives by setting up a simple framework and practicing consistently to let it take effect, so that life can be transformed seemingly all by itself. In other words, if you practice it constantly, consistently, right, it becomes part of you, so that it seems that, hey, your life naturally transformed by itself. Okay, so initially you need the self-discipline, and then as you practice, right, over time, it becomes part of you. It becomes your nature. Okay, so one effective way is to set up a personal reward system with a plan. Now, this is at the very beginning stage. Okay, objectives and a personal reward system to reward yourself appropriately when you have achieved it. Yeah, that's the first baby steps. Okay, that's the initial. Then over time, if you do consistently, there's no need for the reward system. Or you can say there's no need for the framework. It becomes part of you. It's your nature. Okay, so that's at the highest ultimate level. Okay, so further understanding a second phrase is that with non-conditioned actions, all actions are manifested from the Buddha nature. That's the I. Remember I said the I, the higher level, the Buddha nature. At the Buddha nature level, your actions are natural, so they're non-conditioned, non-attached. Okay, then the people will also learn to do that. Now, what does the people in this case, if we're talking about the I being the Buddha nature, what's the people? Meaning the people external? No, the people is your mind, your thoughts, your human consciousness mind. Okay, that's the mind. Then the mind will also learn to do the same. The mind will what? Follow the master, i.e., our Buddha nature. Okay, so that's the highest level. Okay, that's very metaphysical, very internal. Okay, so this way the people will transform themselves, meaning our thoughts will then transform. So instead of being more cunning, more scheming, calculating, wanting to take shortcuts, it's gonna not to do that anymore. So that's good. That's how you transform. So without the need for rulers to impose something, or without the rulers in this case would be the self-imposed rules or discipline, etc. Okay, all right. So that's the highest level. But this is also on the broad kingdom level, right? If you're the ruler, if you act in accordance with your Buddha nature, become, you follow the principles yourself, then the people will learn and follow you, and hey, do likewise. All right. Okay. All right. So the third phrase is I prefer quiescence or quietude. Okay. So what does that mean? Basic meaning is that sages all prefer quiescence. Now, there's another term for there's another remember sages. It says right here, therefore the sage, there's a higher level meaning, what translates into the I, right, into the Buddha nature, because the sage means enlightened person. So therefore, we're talking about the Buddha nature being in charge. Okay, so that's what the sage, the higher level meaning of sage. But we're talking about the basic level here, basic level. Okay, basic level. Okay, basic level. All right. Okay, basic meaning. All right. Basic meaning. Okay, so all sages prefer quiescence. That's tranquility. Okay, hao jing. It means qingjing, purity and quiescence or stillness. Okay, so quiescence or tranquility, along with clarity, are the two factors that give us the strongest connections to the Tao. Remember, recall clarity and tranquility or stillness are the standards of the world. Last phrase of chapter 54. All right. Okay. And that chapter is also called clarity and tranquility or stillness. Okay. So additional meaning at both the kingdom and personal levels is that with respect to preferring quiescence or tranquility or quietude, you act rather than talk. Right. That's the quiet. You let your actions do the talking. Okay, so you let your deeds do the talking. Wise rulers talk less and do more. Unwise rulers talk more and do less. So the wise rulers demonstrate what they want to accomplish through their actions, not words. They don't bother lecturing people. Unwise rulers will lecture all day long, but can't do what they really talk about, or what can't they talk. So wise rulers demonstrate through action, not lectures. This is what motivates people to make themselves better, to transform themselves. Okay? All right, so you could do this at the personal level too. I mean, well, that's a personal, but at the higher level, all right, which is that you're, by following the sages, by having our Buddha nature essence as our master, we will remain calm and tranquil, because that's the Buddha nature. That's the natural state of the Buddha nature. It's calm and tranquil. So there's no disturbance. This inner stillness allows one to return to the original state. As long as we are in the original state, one is completely at one with heaven and earth, completely in the Dharma realm or Dharma Dhatu. So there's no disturbance. That means our thoughts. We have no more attachments, no more these six sense thoughts or six consciousness, desires, etc. Okay, so that's when we enter the true original state. All right, okay, so that's the very higher level. Okay, all right, so let's look like the third phrase. Okay, the third line, which is do not interfere and the people enrich themselves. So basic meaning at the kingdom level is that wise rulers refrain from meddling in people's lives or imposing or interfering in people's lives. This is based on the old concept that a kingdom or state has natural vitality, like a living organism. We talked about that, right? So besides removing any limitations or obstacles that harm the vitality of the organism, there's not much else to do. Okay, so when the harmful things are removed, the natural vitality of the kingdom will manifest. Now, see, so now, I mean, this has a lot of impact, a lot of interpretations, you know, connections to, you know, how such things, you know, at the I'm talking about external now, at the state or country level, kingdom level, you know, and impact in reference to public policy, economics. Okay, I don't want to go into that because that's that digression. But if you want to drill down deeper, that's an impact. Now, just by reading this, people say, oh, okay, so I do not interfere. That means, yeah, let's say in terms of economics or even public policy, we should have less laws. Okay, that's right. Or should we go to the other extreme, which is laissez-faire? We say laissez-faire economics, right? Certain, you know, if you look at, if you study the history of economic concepts or ideas, you know, there are certain schools of thought. You know, I think the Austrian school, the Chicago school, the Freeman school, their emphasis is on laissez-faire, as much laissez-faire as possible. So that's one extreme. And then you have the other extreme, which would be then Marx, you know, et cetera, you know, who talks about the state that completely dominates the economy. I don't want to go into economics. I have no time. But Lao Tzu is not advocating either of that. What he's just saying is that you have to remove just any obstacles or issues that could harm the greater good or the vitality of in this case, the state of economics of the kingdom. Okay, all right. And then if you could remove those obstacles, then there's not much to interfere, not much, then you can let it. So the Austrian school is talking about the second half. They admit that there could be obstacles that you have to deal with them, but you know, they oppose this notion of government interference, etc., or constantly, you know, meddling. Okay, that's because, you know, the government policies couldn't resolve those limitations or whatever because it's too complex. Anyway, I don't go to things, but you can do. But I just want to give you the idea that Lao Tzu is not talking about doing nothing. You know, just let us stay laissez-faire, hands off. Okay, laissez-faire. You know, be, you know, whether in public policy, economic policy, whatever. Okay, social policy, whatever. Okay, he didn't say that you do nothing. No, that's misinterpretation. Okay, but he didn't also say, oh, you have to dominate, you have to do everything. No. So there's a middle path. Okay. So whenever problems arise, the government should deal, in this case, the kingdom, if you're the ruler, should deal with it. But then when it's gone, then you let things go, right? So just like in the Diamond Sutra or Buddhism, when we say, 事来则应，事去则静, right? So when problems or issues arise, you deal with it. You have to do something. So that means you're doing something, okay? You're reacting. Okay, you're doing something. You're doing. Then you resolve it. So when the issues or whatever problems are resolved or go away, then you return to what? Quiescence. Then you can say you don't need to do anything anymore. That's true. You don't need to interfere. So you have to do both. Okay, so there's a both. Okay, so anyway, all right, I get too much time. I just want to make sure that you don't lead to the wrong conclusion that Lao Tzu is advocating doing nothing. That's how people interpret Wu Wei, right? Wu Wei means non-action, literally. That's one interpretation. But Lao Tzu is not saying that you literally don't do anything. Okay, that's not the meaning. Okay, so same idea. Okay, so at the personal level, we can also remove unhelpful elements from our life. You don't need to add things. Instead, you need to subtract and reduce. That's the way the natural vitality. Okay, chapter 48, daily laws. Okay, so that's another example. Okay, I don't want to go into that. Chapter 48 is daily laws. We talked about that a little bit. Okay, it talks about unattached actions. But anyway, okay, so all right. So further understanding is, if we return to the state of our Buddha nature, purity and stillness, we return to the essence, then our mind and body will be content and serene and joyous, like living in paradise. Okay, so Lao Tzu is not talking about doing nothing, but also not talking about always interfering. That's why he used non-interference here. All right, so it's a middle path. That's the Tao. That's the middle path. Okay, the middle way. All right. Okay, let's do to the last phrase. Okay, which is basic meaning is, okay, I have no desires, and the people will what? Simplify themselves. Wait, how do I say rich? Okay, all right, okay. I just want to talk about, this is the enriching yourself, is that when you remove, right, your life will emerge prosper and natural. That's how you enrich yourself. Okay, all right. Just want to emphasize that. Okay, so basic meaning is having no desires. That does not. Okay, now, yeah, you can take it literally when he says, I have no desires. Okay, so yeah, you can say literally, no desires means not. That's at the highest level. That's at the Buddha's nature level. Yeah, at the Buddha nature level, there's no such as desires. Okay, because there's no ego, etc., etc. Okay, no attachment. None of that. No reliance on the six senses, six portals, etc. Okay, but at the basic level, at the even at the human level or at the kingdom level, definitely, it just means or at the ruler level, right? The ruler managing excess desire. It just means you start out. Yeah, we all have desires because we all have the ego, right? We all have the six consciousness, six portals, six senses, etc., etc. Okay. So we're going to have desires as a human, okay? That's natural, okay? I'm not talking about the Buddha nature level, at the enlightened level, okay? But so first, you have to manage excessive desires. Yeah, you start from the basics, right? So that's basic, okay? That's what, okay, so as a ruler too, you have to be careful, all right? You have to, right here. Okay, so basic needs are, so what is basic needs? Basic needs are what? Requirements, not desires. That's the difference. Okay, that's the difference design. So what's a basic need? I mean, come on. We have to drink, we have to eat, we have to wear clothes, we have to live in a house or whatever, we have to put a roof over our heads, right? Okay, so those are basic needs. Okay, so that's not considered desires from Lao Tzu's perspective. Okay, yeah, you need those things in order to live, right? Okay, fine. But the question is, do you go beyond that? Yeah, do we go beyond and oftentimes excessively, right? So we hoard, right? We hoard either wealth or just things, right? Or whatever. Okay, so that's the thing. So that's the key. So that's desires. Okay, so Lao Tzu is trying to differentiate. Okay, so he's saying wise rulers focus on the basics, being vigilant about their own excessive desires. Why they want to accumulate too much wealth or whatever, palaces, whatever, okay? To not let them get out of control. So excess desires can include overly ambitious projects that feeds the ego of the ruler, stuff like that, or conquest, or building projects, or whatever, okay? So this is, once again, very similar to chapter 3. Now, this time it's in section 2. Thus, the governance of sages empties their hearts, fills their stomachs, weakens their ambitions, etc. So just as a reminder, section 2 of chapter 3 is this, right? Section 2, okay? Now he's talking about general principles. Okay, now he's talking about sage also means the enlightened being, but also, okay, so how an enlightened being would do, empty their hearts, fill their stomachs is the what? Basic necessities of life. You have to empty their hearts. Means no desires or, no excess, okay, ego, desires, attachments. Weakens their ambitions means you have no more attachments, okay, so some stuff like that, okay, so anyway, all right, strengthen your bones means the Tao principles, but anyway, okay, so okay, so similar to that, okay, so when the ruler is able to okay, able to focus on the basics, it motivates the people to also simplify themselves because they have the example of the ruler to follow. So once again, go to chapter 3, okay, similar to constantly let the people have no cunning and no desire. Act without contrivance, then nothing cannot be governed. Okay, section 3, okay, just a last section of chapter 3, same thing. Okay, I mean, even though Lao Tzu here is not talking about rulers, but these are the general principles. Okay, same thing. Okay, so okay, all right. So talking about meddling too. Okay, so anyway, so that's okay. So it's very parallel. Okay, all right, to chapter 57. Okay, so further understanding is at a personal level. This means what? That knowing what you need versus what you want. So that's the key. Okay. So when you when you have clarity on this, you can manage effectively. Okay. Ooh. Okay. Ooh. Shoot. Sorry. Okay. 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 All right. So when you have clarity on this, you can manage effectively. This leads to the Tao of contentment naturally. You will become naturally content. The urge to hoard and accumulate will stop naturally. Okay, so this at the personal level. Thus, the satisfaction of contentment is the constant contentment. That's last line of chapter 46. Okay, let's look at the summary here. So, okay, so now we're talking about the positive. So this is the green one here is the negative. Now we're talking about the positive, the 4 pillars, okay, of kingdom is ruling. This is first line, okay, first phrase, ruling the kingdom without by are what? Based on the 4 pillars. Now this is the positive factors, okay? So it's non-attached actions will lead to transforming the people and yourself. Okay, so now both at the kingdom level and the personal. So if the ruler, all his actions or the ruler's actions are non-attached, then it will transform the people or the kingdom. Okay, naturally, if you yourself follow your Buddha nature, have non-attached, then you can transform yourself, meaning transform your thoughts. Right, the people being your thoughts, your mind. Okay, the thoughts. If the ruler prefers quiescence or quietude, then what? The people of the kingdom will naturally be upright or can be ethical, proper, etc. Will follow their conscience, etc. So at the personal level, if you are in the state of stillness or the natural state, original state of your Buddha nature, you're what? All your thoughts and actions will be proper, right? Will be correct, will be in alignment with your conscience, your Buddha nature. And now, if the ruler applies non-interference or does not dominate, does not interfere needlessly or so oppressively, right? Okay, or what, adopt simplicity, okay? Another way of saying is simplicity, then the society or the people can be naturally enriched themselves. Same thing if you, at the personal level, if you do not become attached, if you uh, maintain simplicity, right? Simplicity comes from the quiescence part, okay? Simplicity, okay? Then your life will be richer, okay? Will be richer. You're no longer as, you know, limited by those self-imposed limitations, complex rules, etc. And lastly, if the rulers have no, curb their ego, their desires, their attachments, right? Then what? Naturally, the people will also be simplified. They will simplify their things. They have to simplify, right, themselves. Okay, they will reduce the complexity so that in the kingdom. Okay, so to say, similarly, if at the personal level, if you have no desires, then you will what? Reach that very pure state of simplicity, right? The simplicity of the nameless, right? To attain the unattainable. Same idea. All right. Okay. So that's the 4 pillars. These are the 4 positive factors. Okay. All right. So the deeper understanding, okay, I already talked about this. The I represents the ruler, okay, but it also means our Buddha nature essence, right? When the people's minds, that's what the sage represents, okay, the enlightened person. That means the Buddha nature essence, okay. So that when the people's minds, the rulers have no desires, they will return to the original state of simplicity, okay. At the higher, why is that? Okay, okay, okay. I don't want to talk about, okay, pu. Pu just means simplicity. It literally means well, they say the unprocessed wood. Okay, that's what we I think previous chapters, chapter 37, right? I think chapter 51 or something. We also talk about that, all right? So, yeah, okay, so, sorry, previous chapters, chapter, 50, chapter 37, right? We talked, I mentioned, it goes way back, chapter 15, 19, 22, 32, okay, 37, okay? So it just talks about the simplicity, right? Basically our Buddha nature essence, okay? So it's 2 parts. There's a general, the specific is Buddha nature. General means all the infinite possibilities, because it's an uncarved wood, or you can say virgin wood, that's not yet shaped to make any specific tool. So therefore, it has unlimited possibilities. And so one of that at the Buddha nature level was talking about the what? Divine wisdom or the mystic virtues. Okay, same idea. All right. Okay. So the implication is wise cultivators, okay, also focus on non-conditioned actions, not words. Their actions flow from their Buddha nature, from the Buddha nature. Non-conditioned actions all conform to true principles. With non-conditioned actions, we can be in charge of ourselves, be in control of our own lives, our destiny. Non-conditioned state and truth are congruent with each other. So non-conditioned actions are continuous, lasting, and unending. Okay, so here's the last one is effective. The 4. Remember previously we talked about the 4 things to watch out for. These are the negative factors. Then here's the positive factors. The 4 effective ways, I call it 4 pillars, to rule your private kingdom, right? Take unattached actions. That means no ego, right? No attachments, okay? The results will take care of themselves. The preference for quiescence, you can say downtime, quiet time, stillness. So the silence or the stillness facilitates your connection to the Tao, because that means we're closer to our Buddha nature, to the original state of our Buddha nature. And refrain from interference. Don't meddle. You have more than enough problems of your own, right? Don't interfere in other people's lives unnecessarily, okay, when you don't have to. You can't be dominating, okay, and no excessive desires. Now, just at the very beginning level, ultimately, if you are at the highest level, there naturally are no desires. So, but at first we have to cultivate contentment. Okay, so all right, so okay, so that's it. Okay, so for the summary, now, so the key point, sorry, it took so long, but key point is to be in charge of our own lives is the most ideal when our minds within will not do evil or commit crimes. This way, the entire country is very peaceful. So that's the country could mean your own life. So this applies both to the ruler and yourself. So now let's talk about the ruler. So both. If the ruler or you can be without excessive desires, then people or your own mind or thoughts will simplify themselves. This is the link to the first phrase of this chapter, which is to govern a country with upright integrity. Okay, so this gives us an important insight. In order to rule the right way on the kingdom level, or to live the right way on the personal level, the ruler of the kingdom, or you, the personal level, must manage excessive desires. This is also the key for us living our lives. Everything depends on the mastery of contentment. So this is at the very basic level, how we start. We have to manage our desires, okay? So when the rulers, now let's talk about the ruler level, kingdom level. When the rulers take non-conditioned actions, talk less and do more, refrain from interference or meddling, and restrain their excessive desires, the people of the kingdom will transform themselves, correct, enrich, and simplify themselves. So that's a kingdom level. At the personal level, we can learn from this and let go of attachments. That's the wu-wei part. Okay, return to the state of purity and stillness. That's the quiescence or quietude part. To return to our original state of our Buddha nature essence. Okay, stop meddling or interfering. That's the non-interference, and moderate our own egos or desires. That's the without desires. Okay, or without selfish, have no selfishness or selfless. Okay, this is the proper path for us to fulfill our destinies. That's to take the world. Okay, this is the way to rule our own lives. That's our own personal kingdoms. This is how the sages rule the kingdom. In other words, this is how our Buddha nature would govern or guide our own lives. Okay, all right. This ends. I'm sorry it took so long, but we started kind of late. But it's an important chapter, and we're going to see further continuation, more specific in this case, of chapter 58, okay? And chapter 60, just a little bit about it, it's more specific. But anyway, all right? So if I say anything wrong or incorrect, I ask for the Buddhas and saints and sages guidance and forgiveness. Okay, thank you very much.